Welcome to the Moffitt Method podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method podcast, and I am your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you are listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Today's incredible guest is Coach Brandon Herring. Coach Herring is a native of Hueytown, Alabama, and a 2000 graduate of UAB, where he played football and majored in history. Coach Herring began his coaching career at his alma mater and coached there from 2000 to 2006. He then moved on to Samford University from 2007 to 2014. Coach Herring had an impressive career coaching football in college before transitioning into coaching high school football and strength and conditioning in 2015. It was in 2015 that Coach Herring began his journey into strength and conditioning, and he hasn't looked back. Coach Herring is now the head strength and conditioning coach for all sports at Hewitt-Trussville High School in Trussville, Alabama. Welcome to the podcast, Coach, and how are you doing?
I appreciate you having me on. Everything's going good. It's an honor to be on here with somebody of your ilk. Not sure I belong here. I don't know that I feel like I belong here. It's humbling to be sitting here talking to Tommy Moffitt. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I appreciate that, Coach. But the honor's all mine because I've coached one of your players and I know the type of person he is, and I know the development he had before he got to us. And it doesn't matter if you're coaching in college, you're coaching in high school. The one thing that we have in common is we love athletes and we love our profession. So the honor's all mine, I promise. So we're going to get right to the questions, man. And I can't wait to hear this first one. It's going to be a good one. And so you were a college football player, a college football position coach, assistant head coach at Samford University. What motivated you to transition into strength and conditioning?
I don't know about motivation. It was one of them deals where, we were talking before, we went live with this thing. I got let go and, there wasn't a lot going on. So basically what happened was I was at Samford with Pat Sullivan. I'd been with Pat since he was the offensive coordinator my senior year at UAB, and then I was a graduate assistant for a year and a half, and then coached the tight ends, and then coached the offensive line for him as he was the coordinator. And then when he took the job at Samford, I went over as the offensive line coach, with him there. And so his last year, and we had built that program. It was really, really down when we got there. And, Coach Sullivan did a great job of, just building the program back. The school was bought into doing it the right way. We built facilities, the field house they're in right now. Pat, raised all the money for that. And so Pat retired, due to health reasons in 2014. And I was actually out recruiting. I was at a high school in North Alabama, and I just left the high school, and I get in the car and WJOX, the sports radio station here in Birmingham, was on, and I had heard Samford University hires Chris Hatcher as the head coach. And as I was driving, you either go back across the interstate and go, left north. I was going to Huntsville, or you get on south and go back to Birmingham. And I was supposed to be going to Huntsville. And as soon as I heard that, I just veered on and came on home, because I knew at that point that I wasn't going to be employed anymore, because and Pat wanted everyone to stay. That was one of the things that he wanted, because the staff that was there had been there with just two exceptions, I think, and both of those guys had moved on to bigger and better things. But I know, Coach Hatcher had been with his offensive line coach since they literally played together in college. They were roommates together.
Yeah, never a good situation.
they'd been together their entire coaching career. And so I knew at that point I was in trouble. So I come on home, and sure enough, I got let go. And that year was the absolute worst year to be looking for a job. And you know what I'm talking about. There's good years, there's bad years. And that year there was just nothing. There was nothing. So I had two things going. Number one, I had a gig going in the Canadian Football League. Okay. And then I had a second one in the Mississippi JUCOs. Right. So I'm sitting there saying to myself, do I really want to move my children and my wife to Canada? All right. I'm from Alabama, and you can hear from the way I talk. Canada's a long way from home. And then, the Mississippi junior colleges are actually really good jobs, but I'd already had a few years. I had my years in the state of Alabama retirement system for when I was at UAB. And I'd actually, I'd given thought in the back of my head into getting a high school ball. I missed a lot of my children's, their childhood. My wife, bless her, basically raised our kids. And one of the schools that I had recruited for years and years, Alan Creasy called me, and it was the day after Christmas. And he said, all right, I've let you think about this long enough. You interested in the job? And I said, yeah, and I ended up taking that job up in North Alabama. And then, I kind of moved around a little bit. But, while I was there, almost as an afterthought, I'd already been approved by the board and all that kind of thing. I was the offensive coordinator. And he said, oh, yeah, hey, you're going to run the weight room. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And it was just like that. He was like, hey, you're going to run the weight room. And it turned out I wasn't just running the weight room for football. I had classes. And the superintendent, who I had known his brother for a long time, actually wanted me to set up the entire school on a strength training deal. So what we did was every kid there, if you played a sport or you were a cheerleader, you were in strength class. Okay. And if you quit said sport and weren't playing another sport, they moved you out. The next day you were in a regular PE class. So they were bought into the strength and conditioning world. Now, I had no clue what I was doing, like no idea. I'm like anybody. I enjoy lifting and all that, but there's a big difference in coaching and programming and all that. And, Ron Davis, great friend of mine, who was our strength coach at Sanford when I was there. I leaned on him heavily. And I'm not the kind of guy that, if I'm doing something, I want to do it the right way. And so I started studying and trying to learn and pestering people and reading books and watching videos and whatever I could find on strength, just so I could try to do it the best I could do. And I just kind of fell in love with it, And now I'm not even coaching football anymore, which people think, they're like, you don't even coach anymore? No, I don't. I'm just doing the strength stuff. So there's a little bit of a breath of fresh air, maybe. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I will say this, Tommy, I tell this all the time. I'm a former offensive line coach, and I really believe that high school, and I say high school because I'm in high school, but offensive line coaches can make really good strength coaches. Yeah. The reason I say that is offensive line coaches, good ones, they're masters of monotony. The offensive line position, you have to do the same thing over and over and over again. It's no different than grooving a pattern in the weight room, right? And, some coaches, some of my assistant coaches with football or softball or whatever, they may come in and they get a little bored. How many times can I watch this person squat, right? Yeah. Well, that's what offensive line coaches do. And so maybe that was a little bit of it, why I liked it so much. I don't know, but just really loved it. And now that's all I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about, your wife, having to raise your kids, and I know what that's like, and so people don't understand the level of commitment. They only see the games, and I guess they think college coaches, show up to work at 9 and they're at home with their feet up at 5:00. And, as a strength coach, is doing that in college is one thing, but what people don't understand is position coaches have to go on the road recruiting. And that is the absolute most unbelievable thing that I've ever seen coaches do. I mean, we would finish a bowl game and we're not even in the locker room 10 minutes, and guys were already scheduling their trips to leave. Like, oh, it's, if you finished on a Thursday, those guys are getting on the road on Friday morning to go recruit.
Absolutely.
Like, people don't understand the type of commitment that it takes to be a successful collegiate football or any sport. I mean, they all do it. And so, yeah, I know
it's
exactly what you're
worse.
talking about.
It's actually worse now than it was, back when I first started in the early 2000s. The summer was your sanctuary.
Exactly.
You didn't have all these junior days, and now, of course, they can take official visits and those kind of things. The summer you actually would take off just about the entire month of June. There was nothing. Yeah. There was no camps. And of course, coaches couldn't do anything with the players.
Right.
So that was actually your vacation time. So you would get 3 weeks, maybe 3.5, depending on the calendar, and you were gone. That was your vacation for the whole year, was, right then and there. Well, nowadays, those guys don't even get that.
No, they don't. It's something every day. Unofficial visits. Guys, you can actually do workouts like you do in the NFL. So a guy comes in, you can take them outside, you test them. You can vertical jump, broad jump, run a 40, back pedal, shake a hand, and gone. I mean, it's the month of June. In fact, I have a friend that was coaching the NFL for a long time as a strength coach, and he got out and is coaching in college now. And he said, anything I need to know about? I said, yeah, the month of June. I said, you better get your butt ready for that. And he called me. He goes, dude, you are not kidding, because it's every day. And then on the weekends, you have camps. Now, camps aren't like they used to be. Camps used to be these long 3 or 4 day affairs, and they're not like that anymore. Yeah. But you just keep having those opportunities for kids to come and visit.
And if a kid wants to come on your campus, you don't tell them no.
No,
There is no. If your campus is open and you're in an open period recruiting wise, there is no option to say no. It's not happening. If there's a kid there, you're going to be there, whether it's picking them up from the airport at midnight or whatever it is. You're going to, you're people make a big deal about what coaches make. First of all, they should understand that all the assistant coaches don't make what those head coaches and those coordinators are making. And they earn that
every
money.
Penny of it. Yeah.
They earn it. So,
and there's now, and I think it's like this in a lot of states now, with the National Federation, but you can practice now in the summer. Mm-hmm. So the college coaches, they don't get a break now. They work year round, whereas before you'd get some vacation time, but there's no vacation time, like family time at all, like it used to be. Not like it used to be. Well, let me ask you this. Was there anything early in your career of strength and conditioning that you may have struggled with that was harder for you to grasp? Was it, anything that you felt like required your extra effort, or you felt like it was a pretty gradual, a natural progression?
Well, and I still I do my best to talk to, young coaches and that kind of thing as much as I can. I think it's important to have, some people in your life that can mentor you if you're open to it. You can learn a lot. The one thing I could do, because I was almost 40 years old whenever I got into high school ball, the one thing I could do is coach. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like I could coach. Right. Yeah. So, I'll be honest with you, that's half the battle. It's probably more than half the battle, right? I mean, if you can't coach, and when I say coach, I mean teach and relate with players, command the room, all those kind of things, you're going to have a hard time anyway, right? Yeah. So that's the one thing I had going for me, is I had some experience and had some years under my belt, just absolutely, just coaching, right? Now, as far as the strength stuff goes, when I first started, this will kind of translate back into that whole idea of offensive line coach. It lends itself to being compatible, is that I was very progression oriented, right?
Yeah.
So like,
as an O-line guy. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, as when you're training up a young offensive lineman, you have block A, and then you move to block B, and then you move to block C. And then by the time that kid's a senior, now you're doing some extra things with him that you can't have your freshman and your sophomore doing. When you flash a hand in pass pro and those kind of things, it's the same thing in the weight room, right? So, you can have some of your kids that I'm blessed to work with our middle school kids here. So when my kids get to be seniors, they have almost 6 years. Their training age is almost 6, right? Which is a big deal. That's a really big deal, right? The one thing that I think that I struggled with really starting out is organization and programming, right? Just having a system in my head, and it was almost like you're just kind of throwing stuff up on the wall, right?
Yeah.
And that was the very first thing that I had to solve, because I knew when I was sitting down to write a workout, it was just, like I said, you're just throwing darts.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I was reading books and all that kind of thing, and I have it over here. I came across Joe Ken's tier system book, and if I were to open that thing up right now, it's dog-eared as it can be, and there's highlight and there's writing in the margins and all that kind of thing. And I love the book so much because it got me organized in a major way, right?
Yeah.
And then I loved it so much, I ordered his DVDs, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm watching Joe actually teach the tier system. And since then, Joe and I have become friends. And I've told him before, and I've told people at any time we've spoke at clinics together and that kind of thing, that he basically got me going in a straight line with this deal rather than just being scattered all over the place. I think that was the biggest issue with me. Yeah. Now, as far as like movements go and those kind of things, I had a lot to learn, but again, kind of going back from coaching a sport, you can see things, right? If you're looking at, you can see patterns and those kind of things. So that part of it was a little bit easier, I think. I had to get organized, and when that happened, it really helped me out.
Yeah, that book that he wrote on the tier system was it was one of a kind. And at the time there was a lot of books written about training, but not in a systematic manner that takes you from point A to point B and on and on and on throughout. And it was a groundbreaking book. And, there's countless people that rely on that book and that book only as far as their programming goes. That's how well written it was. And
I tell people all the time, I invite coaches my door is always open to coaches. So I'll take a day off and meet with the whole staff all day or whatever it is. And when they're in the same place I was, I show them that book and I say, get this book. Yeah. Okay. Because, and I still use a little bit maybe of a bastardized version of the tier system. Mm-hmm. But if you don't know what you're doing, that book right there can set you on a path where you can write a program. Okay. Yeah. You can write I don't care what sport, if you're a sport coach and you're in charge, say you're women's soccer, right? And you don't have a strength coach and you want your girls or your boys to work out, you can get that book and it can set you on a path to programming efficiently for your kids. Now, you still need to know how to coach those movements. Yeah. But once you get the system in place and now you can learn really how to cue and coach and what you're looking for in the movements, you can be well on your way.
Yeah. Yeah. Great book, man. Great. Well, do you look at sport coaches a little differently now, or maybe see things from a different perspective now that you're on the other side when a coach comes to you with, something?
I'll tell you this, Tommy, I've told people this before. If I went back and coached football, I'd be 100 times better as an offensive line coach than I was prior, because I've learned I've learned about biomechanics, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of coaches ask their kids to do things that the human body really isn't.
Yeah.
You
Can't.
can't do, or you're
Yeah.
trying to tell them to do one thing, and it causes another issue, right?
Right.
And I'm an offensive line coach, and our offensive line coach here, he's an old grizzled veteran. He's retired at, I don't know if you know, we'll talk off the air.
Yeah.
Brad Boyette's our offensive line coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
He sent some guys down your way, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And the great thing about Boyette, he's retired, but he came over here, so he's an older guy, and you know how those are. You know, they're hard head, don't want to listen to you. Well, Brad's the exact opposite. He's always looking to learn. And since I've kind of gotten into this, he and I talk a lot. And as an offensive line coach, you know, you tell them to keep their pads down, right?
Yeah.
Okay? But at the same time, they also are told to roll their hips or snap their hips. Well,
Yeah.
okay, if you're getting into hip extension, your shoulders can't stay down, right? So you're telling them to do one thing and it's causing another problem, and then you're yelling at them about the other problem, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, you know, keeping your feet moving on contact. Well, if your hips are in extension and they're in front of your feet, they're not going to move on contact.
Right.
You know, so you're doing this cyclical thing, and you're causing a lot of the issues, you know what I'm saying? And things like the false step, right?
Yeah.
You know, as offensive line coaches, I was taught, boy, you gain ground on your footwork.
That's right.
You gain ground. Why? Because it makes sense in your mind that if I'm going this way, that I should gain ground and step that way.
Yeah.
But, you know, the one thing I try to tell people is this. If every single human being on the planet wants to false step, there's probably something to that.
Yeah.
Right. So your body's setting itself up to be in a mode to accelerate as good as it can. Right. So our coach, one of the best things that we have done is our coaching staff calls, as far as football goes, and I'm working actually toward other sports doing this as well, but they call the movements of say our acceleration and those kind of things the exact same thing. Everybody uses the same terminology.
Same terminology, yeah.
Exactly right. So we'll you know, receiver stance, we just call it a staggered stance, right? So your staggered feet. If you're going to facing this way, turning around completely, we call it a hip turn. So our DBs, our linebackers coach calls it a hip turn. Okay. If you're just going to lateral open and accelerate, it's a push, open, push. So everybody calls it the exact same thing. When I'm training in the off season, the kids are here. When they get in the in season, the kids are hearing it. So that's been a big deal for our program.
Huge. So, and my next question was going to be, do you think sport coaches look at you differently now that, you know, you're a strength coach, but prior to that, you were a football coach? But obviously, if you have that type of buy-in from the staff, then they obviously do look at you probably a little differently, with a little bit more respect than just a weight guy.
Yeah, that's also one thing that I will tell high school, you know, coaches that are getting into high school. You know, they're young. Maybe I got one in college right now that he's gone back to get his, you know, teaching certificate. That's one thing you got to understand as a strength coach. You got to be able to teach in a school.
Yeah.
And one thing I try to tell them is coach a sport. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't just be the strength guy. Go coach a sport, because you're going to get a finer, you're going to get a better respect for what coaches are dealing with and what they're doing. And you're also getting more time coaching.
Yeah.
Right?
Reps.
Get your head out of the dang book and get out on the field, get on the floor and learn how to coach, because that kid don't care. Okay. Right. The kid doesn't care what your degree is. They don't care about all that. Okay. Mm-hmm. They want to know that you care about them, and they are getting better by doing what you're telling them to do. And you have to be able to communicate and all those kind of things. So get out there and coach. You know, I do think, you know, it probably does help me that coaches know that I've coached, right? So I've coached a sport, and it doesn't really matter the sport, but I've coached a sport. Yeah. I kind of get it. And then, you know, some sports I don't have any like any background in or whatever. Well, that's my job to get with the coaches and learn about the sport. I need to know what the demands of the sport are, right? So, you take baseball, softball, it's a heavy adductor driven sport. Okay. So I need to know that. Go watch them practice, watch how they move, those kind of things. And then now that kind of helps okay, these things are important for this sport. Now, a lot of ways in high school, these kids just need strength. But when you do get where, if you're in my situation where you have them for 5 years, 6 years, then by the time they're a senior,
Oh yeah, you've spent a lot of time with them and been able to do some really good stuff.
Armani that we sent down to you, right? Really strong. I could do some things with him that I wouldn't do with other kids. But if I'm going to try to help him maximize ability, then I need to differentiate, which is a big word in school setting, for him versus a kid that's a freshman or a sophomore and maybe not quite as athletic. Armani was blessed with unbelievable genetics. I didn't do all that, right?
Yeah.
I just smoothed that stone a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Unbelievable. And like for him, he's very conscientious also. So with Armani, if you told him to do something, he was going to do it. And he wasn't going to ask questions. He was just going to get in there and do it. I had some other questions I was going to ask you, but you've pretty much touched on a lot of that. But one that I wanted to ask you was about any role models that you think shaped you, whether it was work ethic or how you communicated or your group dynamics. One of the things that you talked about was captivating your audience as a coach. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, that you have to be a great communicator, and it doesn't matter how many books you've read or written or what research you've done. If you can't captivate that room and get those guys to respond and do what you wanted to do, they're not going to do it. So was there anybody that you would have considered a big influence in how you coached or anything along those lines?
Well, I'm probably a lot like a lot of people that my dad was a big influence on me. Not so much in the coaching world, but in I learned grit from my dad. My dad was tough on me, but my dad was a hard man, and he worked on the railroad for 43 years. And you don't work on the railroad for 43 years through, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and that knows how to work. And so I like to think I learned, a work ethic, from him. As far as, coaching, probably my biggest influence was Pat Sullivan. Pat was, outside of my dad, was probably the biggest male influence in my life. And for much different reasons than my dad, which is a good thing. When you have people that are pouring into you from different directions, it's always good. Pat was a great human being. He was as genuine a person as you could ever meet, especially with somebody of his, stature and those kind of things. When you go, and not so much with the young kids, we would be out recruiting and the parents would be sitting there going, Pat Sullivan's sitting in my living room. The kid don't,
they don't know who Pat Sullivan.
Now if we go eat lunch, right, there'd be 5-10 people would come up and get his autograph, and he never minded. He would always pose for a picture. He would do whatever. And, when you're of that kind of stature, you never know how people like that are behind closed doors. They may be one way here. And Pat was absolutely the most genuine human being you'll ever meet. And he cared about the people around him more than any person I've ever been around. And I'll be honest with you, and this sums up Pat. he would start every single staff meeting, and you know what I'm talking about, staff meetings. Boy, when you're coaching college ball, there's some staff meetings. He opened every single staff meeting with, boys, don't ever forget how lucky we are to be able to do what we do. And I mean, every one of them, that's what he would say. And he really did treat, kids as family and those kind of things. He's just a great communicator and all those kind of things. So I kind of learned a lot of how to deal with people through Pat. And I learned a sense of humility through Pat. Like, and I don't know if people listen to this, maybe not know much about Pat, but he, won the Heisman Trophy. And in the state of Alabama with older generation, there ain't nobody bigger than Pat. And I'll tell you a quick story about Pat, just because it's a good story. When I first got to be a GA, we were going down to the state high school state clinic, and
in Montgomery.
Said, hey, I was riding with him. Huh? Yeah, in Montgomery.
In Montgomery, yeah.
And, yeah. So he said, hey, I got to run by the house real quick. I said, all right. So go out, and he gets out and he said, just come in. I'm gonna change clothes and talk to Gene real quick. So I go in, and the very first thing that goes into my mind is, where is the Heisman Trophy? I'd never seen a Heisman, right? I mean, how many people see a Heisman Trophy? So I walk in, and, I'm still a little bit, not on eggshells because he made you comfortable, but, you don't want to overstep your bounds, that kind of thing. So I'm actually standing in the kitchen, and I'm seriously thinking about kind of snooping around while he was upstairs changing and all that, looking to see if I can find the trophy. So I'm standing there, and I just kind of look over to my right, and there's a bookcase in the kitchen, and the Heisman Trophy was sitting in the bookcase with cookbooks leaned up against it. Okay. That tells you when I say
how humble.
The humility of Pat. Now, since then, he had, later on, he built a thing in his basement. He refinished his basement, and Tommy, you would love to go down. It was like a museum now. There's pictures of him with the president, and he had the trophy down there, and had all the other things that he had done. Just his walls were just full of pictures and this, that, and the other. Him with former players and this, that, and the other. Anyway, so Pat, big influence on me. And I still, I still think about him to this day.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think for every coach that has ever done it has a story similar to that. Not everybody has ever gotten to work with a Heisman Trophy winner. There's not a lot of those guys walking around.
Well, that's why it's important why it's important for you. And I'm starting to kind of, get a little bit older and that kind of thing. It's important for us to pour into, younger coaches. I mean,
and that's what the podcast is all about.
We're tasked with that. If you're not doing that, you're not doing your job yourself any justice at all. If you'll do that, then you get way more satisfaction out of it than the person that you're
exactly
doing for. You got to pour into people. If you haven't ever had anybody pour into you, then you start it, right? Yeah. You figure it out. You go pour into somebody. That don't mean you're telling them what to do all the time, but you're helping them. Anything you can do to help them, help them.
I think the strength and conditioning field is a lot like that in a lot of ways. Now, strength and conditioning Twitter for the young people, I think, that's their ideal of pouring into people, but that's not it. There's, I think the older generation, when I look back at the mentors that I had, and I haven't ever asked them, because if I asked them, what do you think about Strength Coach Twitter? They'd say, what are you talking about? But there's a difference, there's a disconnect, I think, in like shredding people about their belief systems and the things that they do versus helping people. And when you pour into people, that is totally different than shredding people. publicly because of the difference in someone's views. And
good Lord, Tommy,
yeah,
we could
opened up a can of worms, didn't I?
Yeah, I mean, it's a deal where negativity brings viewership, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about the news, right? News, they don't lead with very many positive stories, right? Murder sells, so that's why you see it on the news, and it's the same thing with social media and all that. I'm not it. I'll be honest, I curate my feed a little bit. I'll mute and block people and that kind of thing, and you'll actually feel better about yourself when you get away from some negativity and all that. I'm on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter, a lot. That's the only social media I can't do more than one. But if you go to the right places, you can meet. And I have friends on Twitter that have become friends because they are willing to help. There's one from down, your way named Tim Kettering. He's in
New Orleans.
He's in the private sector down there, and he's my go-to guy for all things conditioning for my athletes. And I'll be honest with you, Tim and I have never met in person. We've never met in person, but we text all the time. I'll call him. I'll ask him questions because he knows what he's talking about as far as conditioning and heart rate and those kind of things with athletes. And we literally have never met in person, but I consider him a friend, so it can be good and it can be bad.
Yeah. I reached out to him, and my mother-in-law lives like a mile and a half from where his place is.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So so in fact, I met my wife about a half a mile from where his facility's at. But we've just never been able to connect up. But I did talk to him once, and but I haven't been back to New Orleans because my mother-in-law comes up here, so I don't get to New Orleans much. But so my first job was at a high school a mile and a half probably from where his facility's located. So I know exactly where it's at.
It can be used for good. I mean, and
Kim does a good
blessed
job, man.
I'm blessed to be able to, I work with some kids with good genetics around here. We send a lot of athletes, both male and female, to play in college, and through that, and I did it with you. I think I called you and said, "Hey, what does our what?" And a lot of times when I meet them for the first time, I called you and Coach, what's and I already had an idea about you. I knew Olympic lifts were going to be big and all those kind of things. But, I'll call and say, hey, what does my kid need to be prepared for? And, of course, first time I talked to them, they're giving me the old, the baby food or whatever. And I was like, and I'll talk to them a little bit. I did it with Tori Becton this past year. Had one of our kids went out to Texas, and after talking to me and I showed him some videos of one of our kids doing some stuff. He was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, look, so come to find out, the only thing that he does a little bit of that we had never done was just a hanging power snatch. And, I worked on that with Justice, and, he walked in the door ready to roll. And, I told Tori, I was like, look, you're going to put him in a rack pretty quick. And, I think their first lift was on a Tuesday, and after he moved in, and Tori called me on Thursday and he said, I already moved your boy in a rack with the older guys. I was like, I told you he'd be ready. So
Tori does a good job.
People. That's the only reason you and I are talking. I mean, if you think about it, that's the only reason that you and I are talking is just because I reached out, and now, I can call you and bounce something off of you if I need to or whatever.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about. All right, so let's segue into some nuts and bolts because we're starting to, to get to that. In fact, my Ask Coach question today from someone on social media was about at what age do young people or what age is appropriate to introduce strength and conditioning to young people. And so I get, and I know you get it. I got it every day at LSU, and I'm still getting that question. So, just your opinion on young kids training.
Well, I think young kids need to play. And when I say play, I'm talking about play out in the backyard, not play more baseball games and more basketball games and more this, that. Now, I mean, they just need to go outside and play. It is really not hard. I see kids in our middle school, just, kind of in the general, student body and all that. And, this kid has never climbed a tree before.
Yeah.
Okay. Just has zero strength. He's probably sat in front of a computer or an Xbox his whole, childhood. So they need to go out and play. Now, one thing, and I've encouraged, actually one of our football coaches has a boy that's 3, about to go on 4, and he's asked me that question, right? So what should I have Roman do? And I said, the very first thing I said was get him in gymnastics.
Yeah.
If you want him to do an activity, get him into gymnastics, because at that age, it is structured play. When you get into a really good program, it's structured play, and they're teaching them so many coordination things just from tumbling and rolling.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Tommy, I've had kids that are 13 years old that cannot do a simple
head roll,
feet overhead, just roll. They can't do it. They land flat on their back and whatever.
Yeah.
So I just told him, get involved in gymnastics. Even if he doesn't stick with it, if you do it for 2 or 3 years, he's going to see huge benefits from it. And I think in the right situation, you can start kids on movement patterns. Now, do you need to load them? No, you're really wanting to chase kinesthetic awareness, just where their body is in space, because kids they have no clue. They don't know where they are in space. You're chasing coordination, because if you get coordination and that kinesthetic awareness a little bit ahead of schedule, that's going to set you up for any sort of strength training, resistance training, and all that. I started with both of my children, which is another blessing that I've gotten into the high school deal. I've been able to train both of my kids all the way through. My daughter's in 9th grade now. My son's a senior. I've gotten to train both of them. I started with my son in the garage when he was 10, and not loading, just grooving patterns, right? Just moving, having him, doing lunges in all 3 planes, and doing push-ups and chin-up bar, and teaching him to squat properly and all those kind of things. And did the same thing with my daughter. And, both of them are really, really good. My son he's you would love him. You're an Olympic guy. He's a freaking unit on Olympic lifts.
Yeah.
I've kind of encouraged him maybe to compete a little bit. I don't know if he wants to do it or not. He didn't seem, he really enjoys doing it. And, my daughter, I'll say this, my daughter's 14, and she trap bar deadlifted 315 the other day. So she got 3 wheels on a trap bar deadlift.
And she's 14.
She's 14. I started with her when she was 10, right?
Yeah.
And so, and she's really good in the weight room. Look, my daughter can go and lift weights without me, and I don't worry one bit. She understands how to load. She understands how to lift. I'm not worried about it. But it's because I just started working with her, when she was 10 years old, just moving and doing those kind of things. I wasn't putting a lot of weight on her, but, a lot of people think it's crazy, and I'll actually catch some heat on Twitter from people that don't understand. She's 14. You're going to stun her growth. You're going to growth plates, this, that, and the other. Well, she's 4. She's about to be 15. She's got a training age of 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is, she understands how to lift weights.
Yeah.
So I think you can start. You just don't be in too big a hurry to load patterns.
In the old Russian manuals of weightlifting, they talked about athleticism, or a person who possessed athleticism as agility. So they agility with the barbell in your hand, the ability to snatch and to clean and jerk and the explosive power that you need to be able to do it with the flexibility and the kinesthetic awareness when you're in the bottom position and the bar starts to turn on you, you have to stand up. That's agility. And that was developed from doing tumbling and all of that type of stuff, and cartwheels and head rolls and backward head rolls, So the sooner you get them involved, the better they are. And for your daughter to be doing that at 14 isn't, it's not something that is going to cause her problems because of her agility with the barbell in her hand. She understands where her body is in relationship to the bar and her center of mass, and she moves it effectively. And that's the type of stuff that you get when you participate in sports like that.
I also think that, when you do start with them young, and I do get to work with our middle school kids here, and right around that 7th and especially 8th grade year is when their body starts tightening up. Those hip flexors get tight. They sit in desks all day. They sit there on it. Tommy, I am not kidding you. If there is a school, like a high school coach or whatever, listening to this, go around and just look at kids in your school, and every one of them are really, really rounded forward in their shoulders. Yeah. And I'm 100% convinced it's because they sit just like this all the time on their phone. Yeah. They're looking down, they're on their phone. It is crazy how much their posture is bad because you take them sitting in desks all day, and then when they go home, they're sitting on their phone and all that kind of thing. It's just bad, right? Yeah. Well, when you catch them younger, you're able to, I think, in my opinion, you're able to keep that from happening, and it will benefit you. Listen, I am not, like, my shoulder mobility is just awful, like bad, right? Yeah. My wife is fairly athletic. My son's mobility and his ankles, hips, and shoulders is unbelievable. Yeah. He can overhead squat with his hands just right on the edge of the knurling of a bar, and he's just straight vertical. Now, he's got a body for it. He's got really short femurs. He's got a weightlifting body, but his mobility is just off the charts. And I really believe it's just because we did those things. I would have him just
when he was young. Yeah,
absolutely. I'd have him just do iso holds in a squat, just sit there, and then I'd have him just kind of rotate and roll around and feel the movement, right? Just working on those hips, doing all that. So if you want to start with your kids, that is what you want to do. It's movement, right? Get them moving, like you said, tumbling, all those kind of things, and it'll pay off big time, I think.
So you've got middle schoolers, you've got high schoolers. So my question is, like, what's your class schedule like? And how do you train all of these people on a daily basis?
Well, I don't start at the high school. I have groups before school, and then I start during the school day at the high school. I travel over to the middle school. I come back to the high school, and I coach after school. So, I work a good many hours, and those kind of things. And I don't get to train every one of our kids in the middle school. I'm hoping to rectify that situation. Yeah. I'm going to try and get, and I have a kid that's actually from Trussville that's wanting to be a high school strength coach. He's in college right now, getting ready to graduate next year. I would like to get him hired down at the middle school, and he runs the middle school program. Right. Because I told him this, and I really believe this. I have some kids that, want to shadow and those kind of things that come around. If you want to learn to coach, go to get a group of 12 to 14-year-old kids and coach them. Yeah. Oh, hang on. Yeah. My lights are, oh, there we go. Sorry, they're on a timer. Yeah. Get a group of 12 to 14-year-old kids and That's how you're going to learn to coach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's like herding cats.
No doubt. So and those kids have no clue what they're doing. You're literally starting with a lump of clay, right?
Yeah.
And we talk about kinesthetic awareness. They have no idea, no clue. Yeah. And you start working on things like just take an A series on the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about a middle school kid, you can see them get better, not month to month or week to week, but literally session to session. Yeah. You can see them get better. And you can also tell if what I'm doing is actually working. Am I communicating and cueing this kid in language that he understands or she understands at her level? Because you can you can get in them dang textbooks and you can learn all them fancy words and all, and kids ain't going to listen to that. They don't care about it. Okay. Learn how to communicate to where they understand what's going on. And you can learn that with those middle school kids. Yeah. So I pretty much coach all day, every day. I'm hoping to rectify that situation at the middle school. We're getting ready to, it just got released. We're building new facilities here. So hopefully everything gets a little bit smoother with a new facility.
So you have teams come in the morning, or is it mixed?
Yes.
And then throughout
right now, so I cannot work with all of we do not have a facility where I can have 100 kids, right? There's some people, in high school, Tommy, it's a little different than in college. Look, as well as I do, in college at LSU or at Alabama or wherever, you have a really big weight room, beautiful, this, that, and the other. But more than anything, that is so when those recruits come in there, they see a big, beautiful weight room. You don't need to have, when's the last time you worked out 100 kids all at once? You don't, right?
Yeah.
You don't.
A couple times a year for bowl games. Yeah.
Exactly. So in high school, that's a need. You have, because of schedules and all that, a locker room, which is another huge thing for college. You want your recruits to come in and you got barber chairs and you got this, that, and the other. Well, a locker room in high school, it don't mean anything. Who cares what the locker room looks like? I need a big room with a lot of space to house a lot of kids. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And hopefully we're rectifying that situation. It's already been passed to where we build a facility to where we can set this thing up to where we can have all of our kids come through. And I would like to hire another strength coach that works along with me. And however the administration decides to run it through classes and before school, after school, or whatever, but where there's two strength coaches that are handling, because we're a fairly big school. And one guy, one woman can't do, this is not a one person job if you're going to train every single person. So right now I'll have teams that I'll work with, and I'll get them in and out of the weight room. Track will be in the room, and whoever will be. It's just a scheduling nightmare with our current facility, but we do the best we can.
Are y'all on block schedules or just seven periods a day? How does that go?
We're on a weird deal where we have periods and blocks. So 3 days a week is periods, 2 days block. Wednesday and Thursday is our block day. So you've got certain classes on Wednesday where you've got an hour and 25-minute class, and then Thursday, the other classes, and then Monday, Tuesday, and Friday are periods. So that's
a scheduling nightmare. Yeah,
exactly.
Scheduling nightmare.
So in other words, there are days where you may not have students. Okay. So if you're on a Wednesday block day, you've got even periods. So the odd period kid, you don't even see them, right? So they may have 4 days to train, okay, unless you bring them in before school or after school, they got practice and all that kind of thing. Well, on Thursday, now you got your odd periods and you don't see your even period kids. Yeah. Whereas on Monday, Tuesday, Friday, you see everybody, and the period's only 52 minutes long. So we kind of go back to that programming thing. You better know what you're doing with that.
Yeah.
You got one long day. Okay, what am I doing with that? Right. You got some short days. Okay, what am I doing with that? Now I got the day where I'm not even going to see them,
Yeah. Now, I saw that you had a Team Builder shirt on. Is that something you got at a conference, or y'all use Team Builder?
Tommy, my wardrobe is comes straight from clinics. I'll wear some sort of shirt every single day. I either have something with a husky on it. I wear red, black, and gray. That's all I wear, right?
Yeah.
Most of my wardrobe comes from clinics and all that. So.
Because we, like, our company is partnered with Team Builder, and that's one of the things that a lot of people find a lot of value in, because you can put that workout up on the board, or the kids can get it on their phone and do extra on off days and stuff. So when you were saying that,
I've thought about using Team Builder. When I get this new facility, then we will be using some sort of software because we will be able to have, more kids in the room all at once and all that. Right now, I use a Google Sheets thing. Cody Hughes, a friend of mine, he's a strength coach here in Alabama. He's got, a series of sheets that funny enough, his sheets that he sold and I still use, and he's got like 5 different versions of it. I still use the original version. That is what happened with that is look, I am not a computer guru. People they'd probably make fun of both of it. When I was in college, Tommy, I didn't have a cell phone until my senior year of college. You tell kids that and they're like, what did you do? I was like, what do you mean, what did I do? You just used a payphone or a landline, computers weren't my thing, right? So, but and to do strength, man, the more you can work on Excel or Google Sheets or something like that, the better you are.
Yeah.
So I'd gone 2 years trying to design a program for myself that would automate and do things for me. And I'd made a version and I was so proud of it. I had spent so much time on it. And again, Cody is an absolute wizard on Google Sheets and all that. Well, I'd done it on Excel and I sent it to him and I said, hey, poke holes in this thing. Okay. Like, tell me what I need to do. What can I do better? And well, a week later, he would call me every day or two and ask me a couple of questions about it. And I said, well, I was trying to do this. In other words, like I had an intensity regulator in it.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to do like a 5-3-1 scheme and you want to set your regulator at 90% of their training max, you can do that. But my regulator, it was like 3 steps long. Yeah. Well, he sent me a version of this thing back in Google Sheets a week later. And for every 3 or 4 steps I took to do something, he didn't want, it was just one click of a button. And I was like, after I looked at it, I was like, this is it, man. Like, this is the sheet that I've been trying to do. Yeah. And he ended up starting to sell it, But I've thought about I know some friends that use Team Builder and absolutely swear by it.
Yeah.
They love it. And
so I had a guy at LSU that was good with Excel. And so I would write my stuff with Word. I'm trying to learn Excel. So I typed everything on Word and then I would email it to him and then he would send it back to me in Excel. And
that's a good thing about being Tommy Moffitt though, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He was, So
people ask me about, some of these sports science things and I know LSU has gone deep into that and all that. And I'm like, man, look, I'm one person, right? I can't do it. I was like, Tommy Moffitt literally has somebody hand him a packet on a kid whenever he wants it. And it tells him what happened for the week and what the kid did. I can't do all that. It's just me, so I better learn how to do some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and so great. That's a great topic right there for us to fall into for a second. So we did, we dove heavily into it because, especially in college when things are going well, nobody is saying, man, our strength staff is doing such a great job. And, we're going we're going to give all the assistants raises and they do such a good job. But when things aren't going well at all, it's, they start pointing fingers at the strength staff. So, and I always had a question about what was really going on while kids were practicing and what was going on when guys were playing in the games. And so we would sit with stopwatches and watch every play of the game and, time the offensive tackle, how, the distance and the time that he covered every rep in. And, so we did all of that type of stuff. But then the technology came around that is just plug and play. You put the device on, let the kid go, run and do his stuff. But for me, it was a way for us to validate what we were doing, where you could put it on a piece of paper and you could show it to the kid and say, we did A, B, C, and D, and then here's the result. Or you could give it to his position coach and say, so-and-so, well, everybody in your group has done this and they've improved something by this percentage, but this guy here is underachieving. And so it was a way, initially, that's how we got into it. It was a way to validate what we were doing. And then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it got to the point where for us, that every person on our staff had to have an area that they specialized in, whether it was the system that we use for velocity-based training, GPS, NordBoard, force plate. And so now we had all this information coming in for me to interpret and then relay that to the people that needed to hear it. And we were training everybody every day. So I went to the administration and said, we've got to hire somebody. This is a full-time job and I can't do it anymore. And we never, they were reluctant about doing that, but you are true. Like I would get a stack of reports. Like we were just killing trees. Like the reports that just murdering trees with the reports that I got. And it's both good and bad because, I was always a big believer in tracking everything. Whether we use it today or tomorrow, you still want to have it on file so that we can go back and look at it during a slow part of the year and look back and say, hey, you remember in January, we had that question about this, but it just got it became such a big monster that we couldn't track it all. And, so, there are advantages to it, and then there are certainly disadvantages to it. And so now looking back on it, I wouldn't track anything that we were not going to use. And then I would never get back into the situation. I would never coach in college again unless I was coaching someplace that had a person whose full-time job was collecting this information, because it could be a 12-hour a day, 7-day a week position if you wanted to do that. But I don't think that's necessary. I really don't. Looking back. Now, I learned a great deal.
It's analysis, right? So you got to have somebody that can ingest all that information and then regurgitate it to yourself, and then also be able to regurgitate it to your head coach and to a position coach in a way that they can understand. So it's not nowhere near like that in high school. Because you simply don't. First of all, 98% of all high school kids just simply need some strength. They start out, they're like wet spaghetti noodles, right? I mean, they can hardly hold themselves upright. But you do every now and then have some. Armani, just with you as an example of a genetic freak, and just unbelievable amounts of power and speed. And it was important for me, like with Armani, we time and we track times and all those kind of things, that Armani was unbelievably fast, just unbelievably fast. So I could continue to chase that rabbit, or I could work on some other things that would help him be a better running back, which was some agility work and true acceleration work. He could accelerate, But if I teach him how to, because I think acceleration is one area where you can manipulate and do, if your mechanics are good in acceleration, you can pick up time real quick.
Yeah.
And so we would touch on top end with Marmani, but I spent a lot of time focusing on him with some of those acceleration mechanics because I thought that's where we could make a difference in him being a better football player. And I didn't have to chase the rabbit of him being faster. I mean, before he came down to you, he ran a 6'8", 160 meter in indoor track and didn't train for it, just ran out there and ran a 6'8", which is just stupid fast. In fact, when he did that, he and I looked, and one of your LSU's early track meets, some of your track kids at LSU, now it was early on and it's indoor, it's a little different, but they had ran right around 6'8". In fact, I think at that time he would have been second on your track team. So why do I keep on chasing that, right?
Yeah.
The kid that we sent to Texas, unbelievable. Tommy, you never seen him. He behind the neck split jerk 350 and just blew it up. And he's a 350-pound cleaner. Okay. Well, let's touch on that power, but let's try to get you faster, because that was what's going to help him in college,
Yeah. What body weight?
That's where in high school you can't delve into so much information in high school, because there's only one of me and there's so many of them,
Yeah, it would be impossible. It would be impossible for one person to do what we were doing, because you would never sleep. What our goal was, you would never sleep. And so what our goal was, like, for instance, if you have a player and he's running down the field and he strains his hamstring, what our goal was to prevent that. Okay. So by looking at force plate numbers, by looking with the velocity base, and, so whenever I hear velocity based training, I think of fast, or I think the layman thinks that everything has got to be done fast, but what that system did for us is it tracked every rep that we did in the squat rack, outside the squat rack, in the bench press. So it tracked all of our reps, and it tracked the amount of weight that the players had on the bar. And then there was all these other metrics, but you could look at their total load that they trained with that day. So we didn't use it necessarily every day for tracking a velocity, but we used it every day to track their load in all their exercises. And so you would look at force plate data, you'd look at the stuff from, their training load from the weight room, and then you'd look at all the GPS stuff. And our goal was to prevent those injuries from happening. But for that to work really, realistically, everybody in the program has to be bought into it. And so if you go to a position coach and say, hey, Moffitt has exceeded his velocity, his number of high velocity sprints for the week, and so today he can't sprint. If I'm a running back or a wide receiver, that coach is going to look at me like I've got a acorn growing out of my forehead or something. He ain't going to listen to that. And so all of that information is valuable if everyone's bought into it. But if they're not bought into it, it doesn't matter. We had a player.
And I'll say it for you, Tommy. I'll say it for you in case you don't want to say it on here.
Yeah.
The other thing that goes along with that is if your coaches in the sport of football, and we're just talking football just because that's what you did, but if they are running out in the first week of August when they've got a scrimmage at the end of the first week of camp and they're running a 145 play scrimmage, they're not helping your players at all. Okay.
Yeah.
You're talking about fatigue on a scale that you as the strength coach cannot simulate. I don't care how much you run. It doesn't matter because of the CNS demand that the game puts on the kid. You can't simulate that. Now, I'll be honest with you. I think in high school we actually have and now it is getting a little better in college because you guys can work, or the coaches can work with players. But look, Tommy, in summer, our football coaches, our kids practice 4 days a week in helmets.
Yeah.
Okay. And I ain't talking about go out there, hey, let's do this. No, our coaches script practice.
Yeah.
Okay. They run 7-on-7. They have their entire defense, their entire offense in. Our kids, in some places, can do this, some places can't. A lot of it depends on the level of athletes you're dealing with. But our kids run team against one another.
Yeah.
They are practicing the game. And so when they put on the shoulder pads, that CNS demand has been worked all summer.
Yeah.
Okay? And so now I do work, and our football coaches, we talked about it earlier, are they continually get better and buying in. But I sit down with our coordinators and our head coach, and we ramp volume. Okay. So when they have their first scrimmage, we set it at a certain number of plays. Their second scrimmage going in, we generally get 2 weeks of camp before you go into game week. Then that second scrimmage, we ramp the volume again. Okay. So too many times, and I didn't know this, Tommy, I'm an old football coach. I didn't know this. You're so itching to get out there and coach, right? I mean, that's what you do. You're a coach. And so you want to get out there and get after it, but you put so much volume on your kids when they're not ready for it, and then you wonder why they're getting hurt, okay?
Yeah, and it takes
doesn't
weeks
make any
for them
sense
to recover from it.
All right, so here's something real simple for anybody to listen to this. If you're kind of maybe lost in what we're talking about, here's the thing. If you're going to run a marathon, okay, and you're going to train for that marathon, you're going to New York to run the marathon, you don't start out day one running 26 miles. Does that make sense? You don't do that. You build yourself up to it, right?
Yeah.
So in a lot of football coaches actually do it in inverse order.
Yeah.
You think about this now. They start out hot to try. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden,
brand new race car, man.
Oh, absolutely. Let's roll.
Brand new
Let's
race
get
car.
as much mileage out of this thing as we can. And then the closer they get to game day, the less volume they're doing.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You're starting the marathon training, and then you're cutting your mileage as you get down to when you're going to run the actual mileage.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. Your volume should be ramping and getting them ready for what they are going to see on that first ball game, rather than starting it in the inverse order and tailoring and tapering as it goes. And people wonder why kids are getting hurt. Now, I'll tell you that, and it's not, I don't know, you know how it is, Tommy. Sometimes you have injuries and you can't, no matter what you do. But right now we're in a bye week. We've played 10 ball games. We played 10 straight games. We have a bye week before we play the playoffs start next week. We've had one starter miss a game, one, and he had a quad bruise. It was a running back. He got a quad bruise from a knee into the thigh, and he missed one ball game. That's it. We haven't had another lost time injury. Now, we've had some kids have to miss some reps in practice, beat up, but we haven't had anybody miss a game. And
amazing.
A lot of that is we have a strength program to where the kids come up through it, and they're building resiliency through that. And then a lot of it is our coaches are freaking intelligent on how they practice their kids, and they go hand in hand. Yeah, they really do. You can't be tugging the rope on opposite directions. You know, they work hand in hand. So the more a strength coach can communicate with his sport coach, and the more the strength coach understands about the sport, the more the kids are going to benefit from it. Sorry, I'm in.
No, that's good. That's why we're doing the podcast. So the fact, and see, in Louisiana, they have the same rules, and I don't know if it's a national federation rule or it's just the state association has a choice about how they practice in the summertime. But
there are some states that don't get to do what we do.
Yeah. Louisiana.
So I think it's state by state.
So my son would get up this summer every day he had practice. They would go in and they would practice and then have weights and then practice after. So, but they were there 5 days a week, most of the summer. But in college, the way the NC2A done it, it's muddled. And, you have to read between the lines, and how I'm preaching to the choir now. You got to get a ruling and interpretation from compliance, and then they're going to call all the other schools. What are y'all doing? And everybody's going to lie. But there is some activity that the coaches are allowed to do, but it's so new, then the coaches really don't understand what they're doing either, to some degree. But the problem for us was that it's like waking up on Christmas Day with all these new toys, and all you want to do is go outside or go and play with them and crash them and wreck them up. And our goal was to try to prepare our guys for the first 3 days of training camp. Because, you don't have gear on. The acclimatization phase that the NC2A outlines isn't proper because, it's ridiculous. And so you go out there and there's no pads on. So the velocities are higher. I couldn't wait until we put pads on because everybody would slow down. Because they're supercharged up. They don't have pads on. Guys are flying, and you're out there for 2.5, 3 hours the first day of practice. And the volumes and the distances that we would see would equal almost an entire weekly load we would see in 1 day of practice. And it was just too much too soon. And our trainer used to always say that we're going to knock the vigor out of them the first 3 days of practice. But that's what you do. Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with the way the rules are written and interpreted, by compliance and stuff. But it's definitely better in high school, much better the way the rules are written. And it's clear you can go practice. And it's not like that.
Well, and even though that happens, that's why our coaches, I really appreciate them, and they do a good job of, we'll talk about things like inside drill, right? Yeah. And the first day you put on gear, inside drill is lit, right? Everybody's excited. Okay. Well, if you're not careful, what'll happen is the offensive line coach will script, I want to get as many reps as I can possibly get, right? We got 12 minutes in this period.
We're going to get,
my gosh, we're going to get 28 reps.
24
right?
plays.
Exactly. Let's go. And they're turning them over, and then they're late for the next drill because they keep on going. Well, the way our coaches do it is there's a set number of plays. And however long it takes, that's what we're doing. Yeah. And they'll start out with some things simple, right? If you're doing a team drill, have 4 plays. Not, a lot of times when you're scripting practices as a football coach, you go 4 or 5 or 6 plays. That's what you'll do. So what we'll do is first day is 4 plays, and we'll go 4 plays per group. Okay.
Per second, third.
And then the next maybe 2 days later, all of a sudden it'll tick up to 5, right? Yeah. And then you go 3 days later, maybe on that next Monday, you're sitting at 6. And then by the time we get up into game week, we will tax them a little bit with a 12-play drive, with a 14-play drive, with a timeout in the middle of it, right? And I'll try to train them that way as well. So I'll give them work to rest ratios in the summer. And I do this some. It depends on what our coaches are doing. But we'll do some work to rest ratio things to try to simulate what's happening in a drive. So I actually have a deal where if we're doing work to rest stuff, we'll work 4 to 7 seconds, roughly the average play. And then I'll start out, if it's early on in spring, getting ready for spring ball, we'll start out with 35 seconds rest. So that's almost a full play clock, right? Yeah. And then my no huddle is set at 23 seconds. If our kids can do that 4 to 6, 7 seconds work and 23 seconds in between, that's simulating a pretty high tempo no huddle team. And then we'll hit 4 reps, we'll hit 6 reps, we'll hit 8 reps, we'll hit 4 reps. We're simulating some drives, trying to get them ready for what they're going to feel. Right. And then we mimic that same exact thing in practice. We ramp them as we go. and so that's what's kind of getting them ready to go. And people think I think it's been 3 or 4 years in a row now, our first opponent that we've played, I've had coaches ask me, what are you doing? Your kids don't cramp. What are you doing? Like, how are you? Hey, we just drink a lot of water. Well,
Yeah.
The cramping thing, people put too much stock into hydrating. That's a part of it. But I think that CNS
Fatigue. Yeah.
getting and hey, playing full speed, right?
Mhm.
Getting them in full speed, doing their work to rest ratio, sprinting, right, as fast as they can. That's about as big a tax on your central nervous system as there can be. We actually sprint, Tommy, on Thursdays every day of the season. Every Thursday during the season, I sprint our kids. We hit a couple of reps of full tilt sprint and time sprints on Thursday before we play on Friday. And you're getting them ready at that point for what's going to happen when they play on Friday or play on Saturday when you're doing that,
Yeah. So again, that's where high school's got this figured out. I think a little bit better because, in college, Tuesday is your hardest practice day. And from that day on, you taper off. But so again, my son's school, they do the same thing on Thursday. So now Wednesday, they do a light practice on Wednesday and they lift. And then they come back on Thursday with a really good practice where they're flying around. And so you're correct there. So do y'all run tempo?
Yes.
Y'all run.
In fact,
your offense, is it a tempo offense?
Our motto of our whole program is, and it's all over everything, is Husky fast. So we can operate at a pretty high tempo. And that just kind of depends on what's happening. If you ain't making any first downs, then generally that slows down. But if you're kind of moving the ball, then it gets a little bit faster, and all that. So we do run tempo.
Good. Are there any lifts that you feel that are important for every sport?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question, ain't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I threw that out there right in the middle of our talk about tempo. I just thought I'd switch gears on you there for a second.
I think in high school, it and this is a standard deal, it depends, right?
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in strengthening the entire posterior chain. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now there are certain lifts where I have my softball girls in. Our softball program here is legit. Okay. They won 3 state championships in a row.
Wow.
If it wouldn't have been for COVID, it would have been 4 in a row. In fact, the COVID year was probably Taylor's best team that she's had here, and they couldn't play for it. They probably won 4 in a row. They played for it last year and got beat. Our softball program, it is so fun to work with them because they just flat get after it now. Look, any one of those girls can walk in the weight room with my football guys and work out with them and know exactly what they're doing. I think you got to establish movement patterns. And once you establish some things, then they can pretty much do whatever you want. So I think that's a loaded question. It's a loaded question because I do. There are certain lifts. We trap bar deadlift here. Mm-hmm. If there were less of them and more of me, we would conventional deadlift, just simply because of the posterior chain benefits of it. But I can, once I teach my kids to trap bar deadlift, I don't have to have my eyes on them all the time. Okay.
Right.
Once they know how to set and they're neutral, they're strong enough to pull the weight, I don't necessarily have to see them all the time. And it's a great way to build strength through the center of mass, which is sports, right? So I think that's a lift that I would do with any sport, and I've done it with cross country kids. People think cross country doing circuits and all that. I do the exact opposite. I chase strength with cross country kids. Trap bar deadlift is pretty much something that most of my programs are going to do. My squat patterns vary according to where they are. Okay. So I may have kids at any time on a day where we are hitting a squat pattern. You may, and people have come in our weight room before, and I've had, some people come in to shadow or whatever, and they're like, how do you know what's going on? Because I may have a front squat, a split squat, a goblet squat, and have kids in doing Hatfield squats with a safety squat bar all at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. Well, it just depends on where they are and what they need to be doing. Some of my skill kids, they have not bilateral squatted all season. Okay. Now they're moving a bunch of weight on a safety squat bar Hatfield reverse lunge. And when I say a bunch of weight, I'm talking about 170-pound kids moving 330 pounds on a reverse lunge, right? So we're still loading patterns, but we're chasing kind of some of the things that they do. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't squat, front squat or Hatfield squat or whatever. It's just depending on where they are, how long they've been in our program, what it is that we're trying to do with them, right? So that is a loaded question. One lift that all my kids are going to do, regardless of sport, I don't care, is a barbell RDL. Yeah. We're going to do an RDL, period. I think it's my favorite lift as far as I talked about the posterior chain being the biggest thing, and there ain't much that's going to be better than a heavy RDL. In fact, we had a couple of football guys the other day that hit 405 pounds for triples with a barbell RDL, and it's a big deal. Some of our softball girls are up over 200 pounds for sets of 3 on a barbell RDL. So that's a lift that we make a big deal out of. Yeah,
it's a great lift too. Really good. All right. So now we're on the topic of posterior chain. Do you ever do any Nordic exercises, or what I call Russian leans? Do you ever do those?
Yeah, and we don't, that's also a deal where people butcher that movement. It doesn't, doing a full Nordic, there ain't many that can actually do a full Nordic correctly, right? Most of the time, if somebody goes down and touches their chest on the ground and gets back up, there's huge amounts of hinging in their hips and all those kind of things. Exactly. Yeah. So what we generally do on our Nordic stuff, and we do it, it's one of our knee dominant posterior chain movements. We do it year round. I think it's a great movement. We do it all the time. We do it year round, but we just try to teach them that they're in full extension. One thing that, and I talked earlier about being able to communicate and getting kids to understand what you're saying to them. You can say the word flexion and extension, and our kids understand what flexion and extension means, but when you start getting too technical with them, you lose them, right? Yeah. So here's how I teach the Nordic lean. What we say is, we got 2 ways to cue this. You're either going to pinch a dollar bill in between your butt cheeks, or you got a ping pong ball in between your butt cheeks and you're trying to explode the ping pong ball, okay? Yeah. And when you lean, you lead with your hips, not with your chest. Okay. Right. So your hips should actually be leading rather than your shoulders. And then that actually gets them into that extension that you're really building the posterior chain and the hamstring, especially through, which is what you're trying to do, rather than going into that flexion in that hip, in that hinge pattern. Yeah. You might as well get into like a glute ham machine if you're going to do something like that. So just, know what you're working and how you're doing it. And that's 2 simple things that we do, so we'll have hip dominant and then we'll have some knee dominant.
Yeah. When y'all do the Nordic exercise, do y'all do the eccentric phase only, or do you go eccentric and then concentric?
Generally, I have talked about earlier, just progressions. Generally, what I do is I do a lot of ISO holds when they really first starting. So I don't, honestly, they're here, they may lean to there. I don't know how far they go. It doesn't necessarily matter. But what I'm looking for is for them to go in and ISO whatever the bottom is that they can achieve. And we generally will go with a 3-second ISO hold right there. And then they try to pull themselves back out of it. If they can't pull themselves back up out of it, then I'll just tell them you're going too far. Okay. I don't want this to be, if you feel that hard cramping sensation, you're going too far right now. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I want you to be able to control however far it is that you're going and then bring yourself back out of it. And slowly they just get a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. We do a lot of isometrics with it as much as anything. Now, as they start getting down into a pretty steep angle, then we will just work that eccentric. They'll give a little bit of a bounce and then come back out of it. And then at some point, maybe they can do a full Nordic, although that is really hard to do if you're doing it in the way that we're talking about doing it.
You would love the Nord board.
I've seen it, and
you would love it. It's expensive. Well, you don't even buy it. They don't even let you buy it. They just lease it to you. That's how expensive that damn thing is. But you would love looking at the numbers on it. That's what I mean. The Nord board was one of my favorite things to test because, you get to see some really good numbers off of that. And then you can say, oh, that's why that guy is so fast, because your fastest guys have the strongest hamstring strength. And that's just the way it all, unless they got one of those central nervous systems where they just were blessed by God, you're fast. Boom.
Yeah. And we've got a few of them. I mean, Armani was that way, right? Yeah. It ain't like I made him that fast. I mean, he came out of the womb fast. I mean, his central nervous system is in a whole different place than mine.
Yeah. Now, do the coaches at Hewitt-Trussville, do they let you do all the programming? Do they have any input into it? Or do they trust that, you're?
I'm in a great situation in that my head coach trusts me, and he lets me do what I think is best. Now, if I'm making a major change, I'll be honest with you, Tommy, and when I say this, you're probably going to go, what? I'm not back squatting at all. We don't back squat, like, at all. We do zero back squatting. Okay. And of course that was a major change when you're talking to football coaches, right? Yeah. Even your defensive coordinator, your offensive line coach. What do you mean we're not back squat? Our offensive line coach, in fact, Brad Boyette, we talked about earlier, what we do is, I front squat the crap out of them.
Yeah. Well, that's a great.
And then when I feel good about it, when I feel that they are squatting really well in a front squat, what we do is we have gone completely to a Hatfield squat. Okay. Mm-hmm. And my rationale behind that was this. And I told Josh this, and like Brad came in the weight room and he's like, what are we doing? What is this? You're not back squatting, you're doing this. So I sat down with the staff and I said, ultimately, guys, don't tell me this, that, and the other. What are we getting out of the back squat, or what are we chasing out of the back squat? And it finally got down to, leg strength. I said, okay, all right. And I said, if you give me 6 weeks, these kids are going to be squatting more weight than you ever thought they would be able to squat. Okay. Because if you're truly chasing leg strength, and I know there's other components to it, that was only one of my reasonings behind it. To perform a back squat correctly, there is also a lot of skill involved. And some people will balk at that and they'll say, no, there's not skill involved. Yeah, there is. I mean, there's a lot of, to sequence the squat correctly and to drive out of that hole correctly and to set up correctly, there's a lot of skill involved in that. And when I've got 65 people in the weight room all at the same time, that's a lot of teaching. Whereas once I taught them how to get on that Hatfield squat, first thing is they are able to stay almost straight vertical in their torso on that squat. It is natural. It's really easy for them to do. And so we're able to chase, and it got to a point where our coaches were like, this is freaking awesome. We had an offensive lineman in July. He squatted, on a Hatfield squat, he squatted, we did a 5-3-1 scheme. He hit 500 pounds for 8 reps. Yeah. And do you think, and I'm talking about full squat. Yeah. Do you think that kid would be able to back squat 500 pounds 8 times? No. So if we're chasing leg strength, here it is. I'm taking, and ultimately for me, what it was, I'm taking the skill out of it, and I'm driving output. That was my whole rationale behind it.
Yeah.
And so we chase that anterior strength and that posture with the front squat, and then I move them into a Hatfield squat.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, yeah, no. So there are power lifters that spend 30 years perfecting their squat. And really good squatters, you can watch them squat and they can do 3 reps, and you would say those 3 reps were identical to one another. And then you asked him, he tears all 3 reps apart. So no, I agree with you.
Here's the other thing with that. I'll say this too, Tommy. You have assistants, and you also have GAs, and you have interns that are all CS guys and girls that know exactly. All right. So there's just me, right?
Yeah.
And you also, and now I'm actually trying to get this set up. We have a trainer. We just got a new trainer. He's unbelievable. We're working with, I'm trying to get into a vertical alignment with our medical staff. Okay. So it's going from me to our trainer, to our physical therapist, to our doctor. I text and talk with our doctor all the time, which is awesome. But what we're going to do is we're going to have kind of it's not necessarily the functional movement screening, but we're going to have a screening for our kids. And so they're going to be able to tell me, hey, this Johnny needs to do these things. He's got this issue, that, and we can program with that. If we need to send him to some physical therapy, we'll do that.
Yeah.
And so we're setting that up. Well, you guys at LSU already have that. When it's just me and you're dealing with a back squat, then a kid may have all these issues. And now I'm sitting here with this kid trying to figure out, why is his feet splaying? What's going on there? Is he got, is he need glute strength? What's going on? And then meanwhile, I got other kids over here squatting, and I'm not paying any attention to them. Okay?
They might have 450 pounds on the bar. Yeah,
exactly. That Hatfield squat, I don't have to worry about that near as much. You know what I'm saying? So I'm taking a little bit of that out of it.
Yeah. Well, because every kid that comes in your weight room, they're different. Every one of them's going to have a different femur, a different tib length, a different spine, thoracic mobility. There's so many factors that go into a good squat, from shoulder mobility all the way down to ankle mobility, and the type of footwear that they have on. So I'm serious. And so the Hatfield squat is the great equalizer. And especially for someone in your position, like you said, it's the greatest example in the world. You don't have enough people to coach it all. So I think that those are good. I think the best thing that you said was the front squat. And if I ever get the opportunity to do it over again, I would probably spend a great deal more time doing front squats than I did back squats, looking back, because of what it does for your thoracic spine and ankle mobility also. You end up with better ankle mobility. The knee goes out further over the toe. And so great exercise right there. And when I was at Tennessee, we had field squatted and put up some really big numbers with that. So, I like that. I really do. You were talking about the movement screen. Whoops. And so, again, here's another technology for you. There's, have you ever heard of the Sparta Science force plate, Sparta Track, or Sparta Science? So that force plate, do what?
Well, I've heard of it. There's not a lot of reason for me to even mess with it.
Yeah, I know.
My budget is different.
Yeah, your budget. Yeah. So the Sparta Science. So there's a guy named Brian Buck that works for him, and he came by the house a month ago, and we sat down. We talked a lot about it, and so it gives you correctives. So they have hundreds of thousands of athletes that have jumped on their force plate, and they have their injury history. So they've written this algorithm that if your jump pattern looks like this, and it's just a counter movement jump with the hands on the hip, you go down 3 times, you jump 3 times on it, you step off. And they have other screenings that you can do on it, but they have found that if you jump like this, if your jump screen, let me back it up. If you play this sport and your jump screen looks like this, you're going to be predisposed to these type of injuries. And it's based on hundreds of thousands of athletes that they've jumped on it. Plus they have their injury history. And so that is something. Now, we didn't have one, but looking back on it, I would have liked, to have had one, because what you can do is jump people on that. And then it gives you an exercise. It gives you a recommendation for exercises to do in addition, kind of like corrective exercises.
Yeah.
To do in addition to the regular program. So you would have those guys, they're doing your regular program, but then they're coming in on off days or after the workout, and then they're going to focus on those correctives that come from the force plate.
And that's what we're going to try to do. That's what we're going to try to do with our trainer and our PTs. So depending on whether it's, thoracic mobility or shoulder, hip, whatever it is, then we're going to have a menu of things that the kids are going to kind of have a checklist of, all right, did you do these things this week? Trying to improve those things. You know what I'm saying? So we're working on it. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think we have people here that want to do that. Which is a big thing, And, PTs make money off of injuries. And our trainer actually told me yesterday that one of our physical therapists said, you realize that this year you've sent 20 less kids to us than we did last year. And he was like,
thank you.
So we're doing our job, right? So we'll do what we can with it, but I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So we've been going an hour and 40 minutes, man. We could do this all day, but I know neither one of us, I got a high school football game here after a while. I was going to ask you a couple more questions and then we're going to cut it off. If you could just outline what your off season would look like, just an outline of, on Monday we do this, Tuesday we do this. Well, it sounds like it's going to be hard to do because.
Well, here's the deal. I'm a big believer just in the off season. And probably some of this was me through the influence of Joe, like we were talking about earlier, but I like a 3-day lift week. I've done some 4-day splits and those kind of things. I'm just not a big fan of it. Really, just going like an upper or lower split. Now, if I were real good, we may do some high-low stuff, with a 4-day split. And you can do it, but that can get a little complicated. You need some manpower to handle some of that and all that. So right now I'm big into a 3-day work week as far as the weight room goes. And then we will do 2 days of field work, and a lot of that depends on, and really honestly, that sport across the board, really, you can get away with doing that no matter what the sport is. Now, if we build this new facility, I will be doing more and more work of being able to have some field work because we're going to have an indoor right next door to the weight room. So I'll actually be able to transition immediately. I mean, you could even go, I'm a big believer in it. I like to do this even where I'm at right now, that if we're doing some sort of vertical force movement, squatting, deadlifting, power clean, whatever, all right, it doesn't do you any good if you can put huge amounts of force vertically into the ground if you can't translate that horizontally, meaning if you can't accelerate, change directions, all those kind of things, it's not doing you a whole lot of good. So I actually like to pair some horizontal movement with a vertical movement, right? So you take, say, a squat or a deadlift, and then you do some sort of like a 2-step explosion from a kneeling stance, right? Or even like a broad jump or long jump, broad jump, however you want to kind of do it. Do some of those kind of things to pair off. So hopefully you're getting that transfer of what you're looking for. So if we get a new facility, I'll be able to do some of those kind of things before a workout and during a workout. As we are right now, we pretty much will lift 3 days a week, and we will do some sort of speed training 2 days a week, speed training, conditioning, all those kind of things. So it just kind of it kind of depends. Like my group this morning, they started out on the field. Friday's an acceleration day for us, and that also bleeds into some change of direction because they're married, acceleration and change of direction. So they did acceleration, change of direction stuff, and then they came in the workout, and they came in and they lifted. I have them for a little bit longer of a time. And yesterday they ran some tempo runs, for conditioning. So I'll try to get off, go off of those and off of that schedule as best as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. I like I've probably, looking back over my 35 year career, I probably trained more 3 days a week than I did 4 days a week, and really only went 4 days a week when the coach had asked me to, like, hey, I'd like you to work them a little harder because they're running the streets or whatever, But yeah, I think especially for high school kids, and it gives you an opportunity based on your scheduling, it gives you the opportunity to go outside, having 2 days to go outside. In fact, all the training that we're doing within our Moffitt Method program is all 3 day, weight room days and 2 days running. And so,
right. It gives them a little bit of a recovery day from the weight room, and like it or not, and I don't care if you're at LSU or you're at Trussville, there's some kids that they hate the weight room.
Yeah.
I don't care how good they are. I'll be honest with you. Armani did not like the weight room early on in his career. He didn't like it. I mean, he was really good. He was really fast. He was naturally strong and powerful. He did not like the weight room. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there's certain kids that they ain't ever going to like it. Yeah. And so, you go just by going from 4 days to 3 days, all of a sudden you may get a little more buy-in just from that. You know what I'm saying? They get a day in between some of those kind of things.
Yeah.
So,
and then they like running.
Whatever you want.
Yeah. Kids, especially football players, they like getting outside and running, and showing what they can do, because football is a game where you run. And Coach Saban told me one time, he goes, look, they don't like it like you like it. They're not, they're on a football scholarship.
That's an important lesson for young strength coaches to understand is nobody cares about it as much as you. The rest of them don't care about it. The sport is the most important thing. You better get that in your mind. Okay.
Yeah. Nick told me one time that anybody can teach somebody to bench press. I was like, yes, sir. But yeah, you're right, man. They're playing football. They're not on a weightlifting scholarship and so going outside and running makes them feel a little better.
One thing, coaches, here's one thing. If you think your kids love the weight room, all right, so what I want you to do is during spring break, open your weight room and see how many show up. Don't goad them into it. Don't tell them it's not mandatory, but it's strongly. Just open your weight room and see how many show up. Those are the ones that really like it.
Yeah. There ain't going to be nobody there.
Yeah. There ain't many of them. There's not many.
Well, Coach, it's been great talking to you, man. Today was a record. Hour and 47 minutes was a record for me, but I could go for another hour.
I can talk. I told you I wouldn't have any problem talking, didn't
I? Yeah, me too. So I found out that although I was a strength coach, and I loved my job, I was really addicted to strength and conditioning and just the art form of it, and being around the barbell and being outside when guys are running. I loved doing that more than whether I was wearing purple and gold or red, white, and blue. It didn't matter what school I coached at nor how much I was getting paid. That was extra. Just being around the gym and being around people and watching them do things, that's what I loved about it. And that's what I miss about it, really. So it's been great, man. It's been great talking to you. I have a tremendous amount of respect for everything that you've accomplished. And, I should have probably talked to you more, but, I can tell that what you do is important to you and that you do a phenomenal job. And you're more than qualified on this topic. And again, I could talk for hours, but not going to be able to do it. All right. So, but here's what we need to do, though. We need to get together again, and eventually we're going to have clinics. And so I want to make sure that, you got an open invitation to come speak at any clinic that we do as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And like I said, it's been an honor being on here with you.
Thank you.
You're kind of one of those godfathers of the profession. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and appreciate everything you've done for the profession.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, you can follow Coach on Twitter at Brandon Herring 0. What's the 0 stand for?
I don't know. It was just, it's one of them deals where you get on there and, Brandon Herring was taken, so I had to start doing whatever.
Right,
I put a 0 and it worked. And
so. Well, I appreciate it, Coach, and let's stay in touch and let's continue this talk next time, okay?
All right. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Here we are at the Ask Moffitt Anything section of the podcast. So it was Ask Coach questions, but now it's Ask Moffitt questions. So the Ask Moffitt questions gives the listeners an opportunity to ask me questions regarding this podcast, the Moffitt Method program, or anything strength and conditioning related. Please email those questions to podcast@themoffittmethod.fit. So I've gotten this question 1,000 times in my career, and Coach Herring and I actually talked a lot about this today, and it's been a topic of discussion for every one of my podcast guests because I think it's important. So the question the question is from Allison, and Allison asked, how old should a child athlete be to consider adding some weight training? It sounds like her children are 8 and 10 years old swimmers, and they're year-round swimmers, and their team does 15 minutes of strength and conditioning at practice a couple of times per week, and that work is a mix of running, body weight exercises, and weights using dumbbells. So first of all, let's talk about dry land training for swimming. So when I first started in strength and conditioning, one of the sports that in collegiate strength and conditioning, one of the sports that I got to work with was the swim and dive team at the University of Miami. So I kind of looked into this, and so dry land training is, it's not controversial, but it's kind of like one of those things. If you ask 10 people their opinion on dry land training, you're probably going to get 10 different answers. And so for some people's belief, there isn't a lot of carryover. Me, on the other hand, especially with sprinters, I think just the act of pushing off the blocks in swimming, if you're a sprinter, would require you to train with barbells or train with weights, pushing off the wall when you do your flip turn. That alone right there requires or elicits a strength component or requires strength to actually push off the wall more dynamically. Okay, so you would definitely benefit from training in the weight room. All right, so but then when you're talking about 8 to 10 years old, I think there's a little bit to talk about there. Not so much that it's good or bad for you. It's just to make sure that what you're doing is age appropriate. So there was a book, and it's a really good book. And I have gone to this book a bunch of times in my career, and it's called Total Training for Young Champions. And the author, Tuda Bumpa, who has written a bunch of books on periodization and training for adults, a very respected author, labeled the stage of training between 6 and 10 years old as the initiation stage of training. And he stated in that book, because I went and looked it up, I wanted his opinion, and he states to emphasize a multilateral development by introducing a wide variety of skills and exercises, including running, jumping, catching, throwing, batting, balancing, and rolling. So Coach Herring and I talked about like gymnastics or just tumbling or, doing movements to improve your kinesthetic awareness. For instance, a skill like the flip turn could be greatly enhanced by rolling and tumbling and flipping on the dry land. So whether your dry land training for 8 and 10-year-olds contains running, body weight exercises, and weights using dumbbells, in my opinion, you could broaden that and offer a much wider variety of activities. And then the dumbbell exercises and body weight exercises be a part of that. But in no way do I think it is dangerous or inappropriate for, young males or females, but just make sure that the work that they are doing and the dosage is age appropriate. And then make sure there's not a great deal of sports specificity to it. In other words, you wouldn't want them imitating the butterfly, okay? Because, we know from experience that early specialization in sports can create some repetitive movement syndrome, or overuse injuries. But it also narrows the amount of improvement that young athletes especially can make in so many different systems, whether it be balance and coordination and agility. So just make sure, again, that it's age appropriate, both the dose and the exercise prescription. And there's no early specialization or sports specific type training done. Just, make sure it's more multifaceted, and there shouldn't be a problem at all. So this brings us to the end of today's podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. It was great hearing Coach Herring talk. He did a phenomenal job. And again, I've respected him a lot. And, this is probably the fourth, fifth, sixth time maybe that we've spoken. And it was always about one of his players that was playing for us. And, but through those limited conversations, I developed a great deal of respect to him because I knew based on our conversations that this profession was important to him and he really cared about the student athlete. And that's what's important in this business. You can find out more about the Moffitt Method by contacting us from our website at themoffittmethod.fit. You can direct message us on Instagram or Twitter, or you can email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit, or regarding this podcast at podcast@themoffittmethod.fit.